Digital art isn't real art. I've heard this phrase so many times. People who don't even make art tell actual artists that their work isn't real or that it's too easy to be professional. Yes, digital art can be easier than traditional. An example of that would be hitting the undo button on a digital piece, and in traditional, having to restart completely or using a white paint to cover the mistake. It can be easier to make a piece online, but you still have to be capable of turning an image in your head into something physical, something something others can see clearly, or be able to look at a photograph and turn it into your own style. How would you feel if someone came to you and told you your work wasn't real? Someone you know that doesn't work at a hospital or Dunkin' Donuts or at a trash collector. You know how much work goes into your job. You know that you are getting paid for the work you do, so it has to be real work. So many people in the digital art community get harassed for trying to keep up with the world. Art is turning digital. It's more convenient, less messy, and you can work on it whenever you want. You don't have to wait for your paint to dry or work while the paint is still wet. You don't have to work in any particular order. Currently, I work with digital art, occasionally working with traditional when I was younger, however. I used colored pencils, paper, pens, markers, and other traditional art materials. I would finish sketchbook after sketchbook after sketchbook, which is another reason why people moved on to more friendly forms of art. There are many differences between traditional art and digital art, but both are still professional ways to turn your inner thoughts into pictures. In this speech, I will go through the pros and cons of traditional art as well as digital art, as well as how both are still real art forms despite their differences. The pros and cons of traditional art. Unlike digital art, traditional art has quite a few cons more than pros. Imagine you're painting or using colored pencils on a piece you're working on. Imagine that it's going exactly how you want it to, and then you drop your paintbrush on the canvas, or you get startled and accidentally draw a line right across your picture. You now have to use a white base coat to cover the mistake or completely restart. After you make a line on a picture that's pretty far along, it's very difficult to fix mistakes like that. You can't just hit an undo button. A mistake like that could cost you your paycheck. Another con of traditional art would be working with certain materials such as paint. There are multiple types of paint. I'll give you two examples: acrylic and oil. Acrylic paint dries pretty fast and doesn't cost very much. This type of paint would be best for projects that don't require you to work while the paint is wet. Like if you need to blend two colors together. Oil paint dries very slow. It could cost a pretty penny, and this paint would be the best for more complex paintings. You'd be more successful making a realistic painting with this. You also have to be careful with how much paint you use. If you leave globs of paint to dry, they'll leave an ugly bump on your painting. They won't lose their shape, and it will stand out against your smooth painting. No matter what paint you use, you will always have rules to follow to be able to get the perfect results. A pro of traditional art would be texture. Like I already talked about, if you aren't careful, you could create an ugly bump on a smooth painting. But you could use this to your advantage. Many artists use large globs of paint to create somewhat 3D paintings. They use a palette knife to place large amounts of paint to form beautiful pictures. Now I'll talk about the pros and cons of digital art. Digital art tends to have more pros than cons, unlike traditional art. If you make any sort of mistake, you can simply undo it by pressing a button. This can save artists so much time. You will no longer have to cover it with a white base or completely restart. You do have to be careful though, because the way most programs work is by saving each section individually. So let's say you finish your sketch and are ready to be done with it for the day. At the time, you could undo every bit of the sketch, so you close the program and come back to it the next day. Now you've started a new session. It can no longer undo the sketch. you have to erase it manually. The program can only use the undo button on new lines. With digital art, you no longer have to mix paints or worry about mixing enough paint. You have every color in the world right on your color wheel. And if you can't find the exact color you want, you can always use the select tool to pick a color right from a photo online. This pro also saves a lot of time. Some programs even have a tool that shows you complementary colors that look great together, like red and green. Many programs, like Procreate, have a tool where you can download any photo and it will take out every single color and turn it into a palette. This tool is super helpful for when you're doing a still life. I can't tell you how long it takes for me to mix the perfect color, just to end up not having enough and having to mix yet another color and cover what I've already painted. A con of digital art would be to get a 3D texture. Sure, you can get the texture of jeans by making little cross hatches all over the pants, but like with actual paint, you'd be able to feel the texture, not just see it. In digital, the only way to show that something is supposed to be popping out at you is to add highlighting and shading. Although both of these art forms have major differences, they are both still real ways of making art. Just because one way is easier than the other doesn't mean that someone is cheating or making real art. Digital art is different. Digital art is definitely easier than traditional, but that doesn't make it any less real. You still need to have the skill set to bring a picture together, to pull an image from your mind and put it on the screen. You still have to be able to look at an image and be capable of transferring it into your very own style. Digital artists are still putting lots of work into every single piece they make. They just choose a more convenient way of making it. Just because traditional art has been around forever doesn't mean it can only be the only true way of making art. Times are always changing, which means new forms of art will be born, and old ones may die out. No matter what form you choose, it doesn't make you any less of an artist. As you can tell, each form of art has its challenges to face, their own set of rules to follow. Today we went over the pros and cons of both traditional art and digital art and explained how both are still very real. There are many differences between traditional art and digital art, but both are still professional ways to turn your inner thoughts into pictures. Now, when you see a different piece of art, you can think about all the challenges that artists went through to show you what their brain came up with. If you thought before this that digital art wasn't real or was cheating, hopefully I've enlightened you on the process, maybe even changing your mind.